My name is June Calhoun, and last Christmas I was uninvited to my own family's dinner. Not because of a misunderstanding or a health concern, but because my daughter-in-law Kelsey decided I no longer fit her aesthetic. She said it gently, of course, with that plastic politeness she wears like foundation. "It'll just be too crowded, June," she said over the phone. "Maybe we can schedule something quieter for January." Crowded, that's what she called a gathering of 6 people in a house I bought and paid for. I stood there in my modest kitchen, rotary phone in hand, holiday roast defrosting on the counter, and blinked. "Is Brian okay with this?" I asked carefully. "He thinks it's for the best," she replied. I could tell she was lying. I'd raised Brian. I knew his voice even when it came through someone else's mouth. Still, I kept my tone neutral. "All right then," I said, and she sounded relieved. I hung up without another word, but inside me something curled cold and tight. This wasn't just about a missed dinner. It was a declaration. A quiet, smiling exile. And it wasn't the first time. The warning signs had been flickering for years. Eye rolls when I brought homemade gifts. Tension when I asked to babysit. Polite dismissals when I offered to help in the kitchen. They tolerated me like wallpaper, something dated they couldn't quite get rid of yet. And now that the mortgage was nearly paid off, now that they'd settled into the house I signed for, lived in, paid taxes on, suddenly there was no room for the woman who made it all possible. They thought I was fragile, past my prime, too soft to make waves. But they'd forgotten who I was before I became someone's mother. I wasn't just a widow or a grandmother. I was a retired financial analyst who once managed portfolios that dwarfed the value of their entire house. Numbers were my native language. I didn't raise my voice. I raised consequences. After the call, I poured myself a cup of tea, walked to the safe in my bedroom, and pulled out the deed. I still held the title. The mortgage was in both our names, but I was the primary owner. Years ago, when Brian's job was shaky and Kelsey was still finishing her degree, I'd stepped in and bought that house outright, with the understanding they'd buy me out gradually. They never finished. They'd refinanced twice, pulled out equity, and I'd let it go. Until now. I turned on my computer and opened a file marked Contingency, Calhoun Residence. Inside were updated statements, loan documents, and a notarized clause I'd insisted on during our initial arrangement. It gave me authority to withdraw from the shared title at will if financial misuse occurred, and I had proof. The last year alone showed 4 separate home improvements that weren't filed, 2 of which were actually luxury vacations thinly veiled as home office upgrades. I printed the documents and slid them into a manila folder. I wasn't going to raise hell. I was going to raise standards. Let them enjoy their minimalist, curated holiday without me. But come January, they were going to learn that cutting someone out doesn't mean they stop existing. It means they stop protecting you, and that, as they say, would be the gift that kept on giving. The Christmas morning air was sharp, clean, and cold enough to bite, but I wasn't at the house I helped pay for. I was sitting by the window in my tiny garden cottage across town, the one I'd moved into temporarily while renovations took place. Renovations that never quite finished. I stirred a cinnamon stick into my coffee and let the silence settle. No wrapping paper scattered across the floor, no laughter, no family, just peace and strategy. My phone stayed silent that morning. No calls, no texts. Not even a forwarded meme from Brian. That told me everything I needed to know. They didn't forget. They had chosen, and in their minds, I was supposed to take it. To be grateful that I got anything at all. Maybe they assumed I'd just fade into the background, like a dusty family portrait they no longer had wall space for. But I wasn't the background. I was the foundation. Literally. I checked the calendar. 4 days until the end of the year. Perfect timing. The bank would reopen after the holidays, and the new fiscal quarter would kick in soon after. I opened my laptop, pulled up the most recent mortgage statements, and reviewed the agreement I had filed away all those years ago. A clause that gave me full control of the escrow account in the event of breach of contract or documented misuse. It was technical, legal, ironclad. When I'd added it, Brian barely noticed. He was young, overwhelmed, desperate for help. He'd signed without hesitation. Kelsey never asked to read the fine print, too focused on Pinterest boards and backsplash colors. I'd made sure they were comfortable. Too comfortable. That was on me. But now I would teach them what it meant to rely on someone you didn't respect. The mistake wasn't theirs alone. I'd train them to expect my silence, to equate kindness with weakness, and I would correct that, not with bitterness, but with precision. That evening, I drafted a formal letter of intent to initiate a title withdrawal and mortgage reassignment. It sounded boring, bureaucratic, but it would be a shockwave. Without my share, they would default on their payments, and when the bank came calling, they'd have to explain why they'd used renovation funds to lease a Tesla. The best part? They couldn't blame me. I wasn't evicting them. I wasn't even showing up. I was simply walking away from an agreement they had already broken. Let the math do the talking. The next morning, I dropped off the packet at the courthouse and mailed a certified copy to the bank. Then I called my lawyer, a woman named Nadia with a voice like steel and a memory like a ledger. "Are you sure?" she asked after reviewing the documents. "I'm ready," I said. "They made it clear I'm not part of the picture anymore." "Then let's redraw the frame," she said. That night, while they sipped eggnog and toasted their curated life, a quiet storm was already moving through the system. They had no idea. But they were about to learn. The most dangerous person in a family isn't the loudest one. It's the one who knows where the paper trail ends, and this trail led straight to Mentha notice hit their mailbox on January 3rd. I knew because Kelsey posted a vague Instagram story that read, "New Year, same ridiculous drama," followed by a crying laugh emoji in a photo of their front porch, zoomed in just enough to show the edge of a certified envelope. They didn't tag me, of course. That would require honesty. But I smiled and bookmarked it. By then, the paperwork had already been processed. The reassignment was in motion. Within 21 business days, my name would be removed from the mortgage and the bank would expect the full balance from the remaining signatories. And since Brian and Kelsey had refinanced last year with an inflated estimate and had missed 3 minor payments, they wouldn't just owe back pay. They'd be flagged, reviewed, and likely offered a delightful menu of high-interest penalty options. I knew they'd panic, but I also knew they wouldn't call. Not yet. They were too proud, too confident that whatever had arrived was just some error. I waited. The 4th day, I got a voicemail. "Hey, Mom." Brian's voice was tight, rehearsed. Not sure what's going on, but we got some documents from the bank and, yeah, maybe we can talk? Call me when you're free." I didn't. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I wanted him to sit in the silence he had gifted me for the holiday. Kelsey followed up 2 hours later with a message that tried to sound composed. "Hi, June. Just wondering if there's a misunderstanding with the house paperwork. I'm sure it's nothing, but let me know if there's anything you need from us." Anything I need. I sipped my tea and let that line marinate. The last thing I needed from them was more performance. I had everything I required. A clear path, a clean conscience, a beautifully notarized paper trail. The real turning point came when Kelsey's mother, Joanne, called me directly. Now that was unexpected. "June," she started sweetly, the kind of voice people use with pets and paroled teenagers. "I hope you had a peaceful Christmas." I didn't reply. She continued. "Kelsey mentioned there might have been a hiccup with the title on the house. I know things have been a little tense, but maybe we can find a solution before it turns into something messy." I almost laughed. Messy. As if I were threatening to burn the house down instead of calmly returning what never truly belonged to them. "There's no hiccup," I said calmly. "Just paperwork. Well, surely we can sit down and—" The same way we sat down to discuss my Christmas invitation? Silence. Then a clink of a spoon in the background. She wasn't expecting that. "They're young, June. They make mistakes." "And I made mine when I handed over the keys," I said gently. "But I've corrected that." Joanne sighed. "Don't you think this is a bit extreme?" "No," I replied. Extreme would have been showing up uninvited and ruining the holiday. This is just math. I hung up. The message had been sent, not in anger, not in spite, but in accountability. What they had taken for granted was gone, and what remained was a lesson they would have to learn without me. By the second week of January, the silence broke, not with an apology, but with a plea disguised as strategy. Brian called again, this time with more urgency. "Mom, I think there's been a misunderstanding," he said, voice tight like a man trying not to sound desperate. "We just need a little help navigating this." I didn't answer. He followed up with a text. "Can we meet? Just talk. No drama." No drama. As if I was the one who created it. As if I hadn't spent a decade quietly supporting their life behind the scenes while being treated like furniture with a pulse. They wanted a meeting now that the walls were closing in. I agreed, but on my terms. Neutral ground. My lawyer's office. Professional. Documented, bulletproof. Nadia arranged everything. When they arrived, I was already seated, crisp blazer on, folder of documents in front of me. Kelsey wore her performance face, tight-lipped smile, hair blown out, jacket draped just so. Brian looked sleep-deprived. I could smell their fear before the door even closed. "June," Kelsey began, sitting down, "we just want to understand what's happening." "It's simple," I said, sliding the reassignment form across the table. "You've defaulted on our agreement. The mortgage is no longer in my name." "I've removed myself from financial responsibility," Brian frowned. "But we didn't default. We've been making payments." "Not according to the contract," I said. "You refinanced without informing me, used the house equity for personal expenses, and filed renovations that don't exist. That violates Clause 6.1 and Clause 11.3 of our shared title agreement." Kelsey blinked, lips parting. "You? You kept track of all that?" "Of course," I said. "It's my house." "Was," she corrected under her breath. "Still is, technically," I replied, "until the bank finalizes your full assumption." Brian looked at Nadia. "Is this even legal?" Nadia didn't flinch. "It's more than legal. It's clean." "But what are we supposed to do?" Kelsey snapped. "The payments are going to jump. The bank wants paperwork we don't have. This could ruin our credit." "Then you'll need to downsize," I said calmly, "or borrow against something you actually own." They sat in stunned silence, not because I had yelled. I never raised my voice. I didn't need to. I had something louder. Proof. Boundaries. Power. Kelsey recovered first. "You're doing this because of Christmas?" "No," I said. "I'm doing this because of every holiday, every passive insult, every moment you treated me like a burden instead of a benefactor." Brian rubbed his forehead. "Mom, we didn't mean to hurt you." "You didn't mean to notice I wasn't there," I said, "until the bills did." I stood. "You don't owe me respect, but you don't get to build your life on me and then push me out of it." I left them in that sterile office under fluorescent lights, surrounded by papers they'd never bothered to read. Finally, realizing they'd miscalculated the quiet woman in the room. The fallout came fast. By the end of January, they had officially defaulted on the revised mortgage terms. Without my name stabilizing the loan, the bank reevaluated the risk and didn't like what it saw. Their interest rate spiked, escrow ballooned, and suddenly the curated life they flaunted on social media began to buckle at the edges. Kelsey stopped posting her minimalist latte art, and Brian's inspirational captions vanished like fog. The final blow came when they tried to refinance again, this time with Kelsey's uncle co-signing. The bank denied it. Too much debt, not enough equity, not enough truth. That week, I got a letter in the mail. Not a call, not a visit, a letter, handwritten, awkward, from Brian. "Mom," it started, "I don't know how we got here. I know we've taken things for granted. I know I've let Kelsey steer the ship too much. I just thought you'd always be there, quietly helping, quietly forgiving." I read it twice, then folded it, put it back in the envelope, and tucked it into my desk. I didn't reply. Not yet. Instead, I poured myself into something else, a property management fellowship for senior women investors. They were looking for a guest lecturer with experience in financial oversight and long-term asset protection. I had stories now, lessons forged from real life, and I wasn't going to waste them. Every Thursday, I spoke to rooms of women my age, widows, retirees, quiet warriors who had been told their role was to stay small, how to protect their assets, how to write bulletproof clauses, how to stop co-signing for people who didn't know the value of trust. Meanwhile, Kelsey and Brian listed the house for sale. The photos were pretty, carefully staged, but it sat for weeks without offers. Word travels in real estate circles, rumors about questionable renovations, whispers about co-owners and title disputes. The truth clings to a home like the smell of old paint. At one of my lectures, a woman raised her hand. What do you do when they come back? Not for help, but for pity. The room fell silent. I thought of Brian, of the boy who once brought me dandelions from the park, of the man who let his wife decide I didn't belong at Christmas. You remember that pity is just performance, I said. It's not an apology. It's a last-ditch attempt to get what they lost without admitting they lost it. The room nodded. They understood. That night, I returned home to my garden cottage, the one with ivy around the porch and birds that came in the morning. I baked bread, watched an old movie, and slept better than I had in months. Somewhere across town they were packing, not just boxes, but consequences. And I hadn't said a single cruel word, just signed my name where it mattered. A signature, after all, is louder than any scream. February brought a kind of stillness I hadn't known in years. No expectations, no obligations, no sugar-dipped pleasantries masking sharp edges. I spent my mornings tending to the garden boxes behind the cottage, my afternoons teaching workshops, and my evenings wrapped in peace. But peace doesn't last when people still believe you owe them closure. One Tuesday afternoon, a knock sounded at my door. Not the doorbell, a knock. Soft, uncertain. I opened it to find Brian standing there, hands in his pockets, looking 10 years older. "Hey," he said. "Hey," I replied, neutral. He shuffled his feet. "I thought maybe we could talk. Just us." I stepped aside. He came in slowly, eyes scanning the small space, like he was searching for a version of me he'd forgotten. "Nice place," he offered. "It's mine," I said plainly. He nodded. "I deserve that." I waited, let him fill the silence. "We're moving out," he finally said. "Found a small place closer to her parents. It's tight, but we'll manage." I raised an eyebrow. And I just... He looked down, voice cracked. "I wanted to say I'm sorry, not just for Christmas, for all of it, for not seeing how much you were holding up." That cracked something in me, but I didn't let it show. "Why now?" I asked. "Why say it now?" He swallowed. "Because I finally realized how easy it is to lose someone who never demanded to be noticed. You never asked for anything, and I acted like that meant you didn't need anything." I stayed quiet, letting the words settle. "Kelsey's struggling," he added. "She says you made us feel small." I met his eyes. "No, Brian, I made you face how small you treated me." He didn't argue, just nodded. "So what now?" he asked quietly. "Now," I said, "you build a life you're proud of, without depending on the people you pushed away." He winced. "Does that mean we're done?" "It means I won't be your safety net anymore," I said. "But you're still my son. That hasn't changed." He looked like he might cry, but didn't. "Can I call you sometimes?" "Yes," I said. "But don't call to fix what's been broken. Call to start something new." He left quietly. No big promises, no grand gestures, just a man beginning to understand what legacy means when it isn't handed to you on a platter. Later that night, I sat at my desk, staring at the title of a new document, Financial Boundaries for Families, a workshop series. Because this wasn't just my story. It was a pattern, and I intended to break it. Not just for myself, but for every woman who'd ever been dismissed, diminished, or erased under the guise of family. My daughter-in-law didn't want me at Christmas, so I gifted myself something better, a clean exit. A voice, and the knowledge that peace doesn't come from being included. It comes from knowing you never needed their invitation to begin with. The house sold in March, quietly, and at a loss. Kelsey posted a final photo on Instagram, an empty living room with the caption, "New chapters are hard, but necessary." No mention of how the chapter ended. No tag, no truth, but I didn't need one. The truth always reveals itself, especially when you let people narrate without the script you once handed them. I kept tabs, not out of bitterness, but out of curiosity. It's fascinating how people shift when the scaffolding you provided disappears. Kelsey returned to her parents' home while they figured out their next move. Brian took on extra shifts at work. They both looked tired, and for once, quiet. The silence didn't hurt anymore. It taught me. I saw now how long I'd mistaken tolerance for love, silence for peace, and tradition for loyalty. But legacy? True legacy isn't built on suffering. It's built on honesty, on truth told without apology. And that truth had finally made its way through the cracks. I was preparing for a financial literacy seminar at the community center when I got another letter, this time from Kelsey. Typed. 4 paragraphs. Precise. "I understand why you did what you did," she wrote. "I still don't agree with it, but I understand it now. I treated you like background noise, and when you became the headline, I panicked. That's on me." I read it twice. She didn't ask for money. She didn't beg to move back. She just acknowledged me, on paper, and maybe for her that was a start. I didn't reply. Some letters are better kept than answered. I filed it in a folder marked closure. That evening, I hosted a gathering of women in my garden, no formal occasion, just folding chairs, fresh scones, and sun filtering through the trees. Women in their 50s, 60s, 70s, many of whom had similar stories. One by one, they shared the moments they realized kindness without boundaries is just an invitation to be taken for granted. We laughed, we cried, we passed around lemonade and stories like old heirlooms. I looked around the circle and saw more family than I'd felt in years, not because of blood, but because of bond. Chosen family, built on mutual respect, not obligation. That night, I stood alone in my small kitchen, slicing fruit for a tart, and realized something powerful. I didn't want my family to fail. I never did. I just wanted them to grow up, to stand on their own feet, to understand that love without respect is performance, not partnership. And finally, they were starting to see it. The house was gone, the holiday tension was dissolved, and the woman they had tried to uninvite had re-entered her own story. This time, as the author, not the guest. Spring came slowly, tulips blooming by the fence, the scent of rosemary and sage drifting through the air. Life was quieter now, not because I'd been left, but because I'd chosen who could stay. I no longer begged for a seat at anyone's table. I built my own, reclaimed wood, steady hands, and resolve. One morning I got a message from Brian, a photo of a wobbly coffee table he'd built. "Not much," he wrote, "but it's ours. Thought you'd be proud." And I was, not of the table, but of the effort. He was learning to build, not borrow. I replied, "I am." That evening he called, no drama, no asks, just a real conversation. When we hung up, I realized I'd already moved forward. No apology required. By June, I launched a financial education program called The Second Signature for elder women reclaiming financial power. The library sponsored it. Cupcakes were brought, stories were shared. One woman said, "This is Ms. June, the reason I'm still standing." And I understood. This wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming space, reclaiming self. In July, Brian and Kelsey sent a handwritten thank you card. We're learning, slowly, but truthfully. They invited me to a summer BBQ. I didn't go, not out of anger, but because I had other plans. A weekend retreat with my financial group. We booked a quiet lodge near the lake, held morning sessions on estate planning and entrepreneurship, shared stories over campfire meals, and laughed in a way I hadn't in years. It wasn't just an event. It was a new tradition, a life I chose, built with purpose and people who saw me as more than what I could give. That's what boundaries do. They don't isolate you. They protect what's sacred. They draw the line between love and obligation, between being included and being used. Boundaries don't keep people out. They show you who's willing to come in with respect. So if you're listening and wondering whether it's okay to walk away, yes, it is. It's more than okay. It's necessary when the cost of staying is your peace. You don't owe loyalty to a place that only loved the version of you that stayed quiet, that gave endlessly, that never asked for anything back. Reclaim your name. Reclaim your worth. Let your absence be the reminder they never expected, not to hurt them, but to heal yourself. Because sometimes the loudest truth is said in silence. And when you walk away with grace, dignity, and peace in your pocket, you don't just free yourself, you light the way for someone else still trapped in that same room. That's not revenge, that's legacy.